When did that light go on in your head, in your life, to say it's important for me to share my story and to talk about my story? Was it for your own healing, for your own purpose, or was it as much because you wanted to help others?
I think that kind of came on the radar a couple years ago, and it was always kept on lock and key for a long
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
I wasn't very good at sharing it. I'm very good at suppressing, and I'm very good at not letting my emotions show and handling things in private in my own time, like not showing weakness, which I think is a big issue for men, especially in this society, having that piece. So that plays a part too. But that changed for me. And when I first started speaking about it and people started hearing about it, their interest peaked very highly and very fast. And I had to be very careful on how I presented it to the world and to people and to organizations and to anybody that being used as a platform for hope and resilience and striving and all these things. Whereas when I first started speaking about it, I found, and this came to me and from a couple of close friends and things, is that when we first tell our stories, and yes, we've lived them and we're familiar with them, but in order to make them come across as pieces of who we've become because of them
Mhm.
and not from a standpoint of victim mentality. Oh, poor me, this all happened to me. I deserve this. There's two different distinct ways to tell a story, right? And when I first started telling it, it came out like that. It came out more of a victim mentality. It's, this isn't fair, right? I've lost two sets of parents before I was 28 years old. Who does that? Or like, why is that all happening to me? I didn't deserve all that, or I've gone through this and that, and on all of these things. And then so that narrative needed to be switched, and it needed to be switched of, yes, I went through this, but I learned this, and this is the person I became. And these are the things that I can relate to other people's stories and what they're going through because I've gone through so much of things of emotional and drugs and alcohol and abandonment and lack of love and abuse and all these things. These are universal kind of emotions that I think are very common and are put behind the scenes because people don't know how to talk about them.
Mhm.
So that's where the shift in my narrative came for me to utilize my story as a platform and a catalyst to help others instead of a victim space.
I think it's important to share our stories. And I applaud you for finding that courage to not only share it, but then also have the awareness, Stephen, to recognize that it ain't coming out the right way right now. And I gotta switch the narrative because people are looking at me like, huh? So I,
Mhm.
I applaud that for you as well, because but at the end of the day, just to step up to the plate and say, I have something that's very personal to talk about,
Mhm.
um, is empowering, because you also said a few moments ago that a lot of gentlemen listen to this thing, also have stories perhaps like you do, or I have, and have been reluctant to share them or want to talk about them. And we've always said, hey, come to the lab and share them with us, or call me or send me a text, because that's the kind of environment we're trying to create here for guys like you and I, as a safe space, the locker room, the lab, to chat about things that we normally probably wouldn't talk about. So you made the switch to the narrative where you're like, okay, this one ain't working, this one's working. And the more human, the more raw, the more authentic you became, the more empowered you became. It's like your superpower, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely, there's a lot of, when we tell our stories, there's a lot of self-reflection, right?
Mhm.
And you have to revisit situations in which we've put in the back burner or we've put in the closet because we don't want to deal with them. We're past that. And the famous saying, our skeletons in the closets. And when we don't deal with that stuff, they resurface, and
Mhm.
they will resurface. And it has plenty of times for me.
Mhm.
I've had to go to counseling. I've had therapy. I've had situations where I've had to have anger management type of tweaks and things done, and to discuss certain things that affect my other relationships.
Mhm.
it's not only about telling the story, but it's about through us revisiting those situations and our own personal narratives that we find our growth
Mhm.
and we're able to evolve and become more and understand where the connections are from our childhood to who we become now. And all of those nuances along the way become our biomarkers in which bring us up to our present moments. So it's a constant work in progress, right? It's not a one and done deal.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we become different people. Different things become our trigger points, and our emotional stability is always volatile. And being able to handle those things in a copacetic manner, it really helps us to evolve as men. And finding stable, good, intelligent, emotionally intelligent men nowadays is a very tough thing because we're always fighting these internal battles that don't come out so much. So that's become a very important piece for me too. I love speaking in men's circles
Mhm.
about those things and about my own story, but then also being able to listen, right? And being able to slow down and not speak or interject or throw out my pieces and my 2 cents, and giving a space to listen and hear, and then saying, hey, I can relate to that. And this is how I handle this situation if it helps.
You have been speaking over the last few minutes. It's this theme of identity. One of my partners in the lab here is a gentleman who's played in the NHL, played pro sports, played hockey 13 years. From 5 years old, he just all he wanted to do was be a professional hockey player. He plays in front of 20,000 people chasing the Stanley Cup, and then he finds himself on Friday nights playing beer league hockey with a few guys, right? We had a UFC fighter here in the lab here a couple of days ago. His whole life, all he was going to be was a fighter, right? And now they wrestle with this theme of identity.
Mm,
Because I think to somebody listening right now who's going through that kind of that identity thought in their head and either out walking right now or just thinking about what's kind of going on in their life, you are the best example of not being identified by a thing. Like your
mm,
life, those identities you've carried throughout your life from birth, if I may say that, up until your age now. Like you have a lot of, if you look at it in the perspective of a book, which I know you've written,
mm.
those chapters are your different lives. And you said your life changed every 3 to 5, 7 years, right? And you're the best example of an identity that's constantly changing, where one day you may wake up as a pilot in the friendly skies, right? That's what strikes me again with you, is that you've clearly found a way to embrace that you've empowered yourself to embrace that struggle or that transition. You're constantly transitioning, Stephen. You wake up today, Stephen, and you look around yourself, like, who are you? Who is your identity? And how do you look in the mirror at who Stephen Benedict is?
Yeah, that's a great question.